At 7:12 on the morning of my granddaughter's 25th birthday, I unlocked the fireproof box my wife had forbidden me to open early, lifted out her wedding ring, and nearly dropped it. A line of tiny letters ran along the inner band, bright under the kitchen window, though I had held that ring 100 times after Eleanor died. The inscription contained Claire's name, a date I did not recognize, and 3 words that made my chest tighten. When she is ready. In 10 hours, our entire family would be gathered for her birthday, and I had no idea what truth my wife expected me to deliver. If you have ever carried a promise longer than the person who gave it, stay with me. I set the ring on a folded dish towel and reached for the magnifying glass I kept beside my Coast Guard retirement compass. 32 years coordinating search and rescue operations had taught me that small details were rarely small when someone had taken trouble to conceal them. The date engraved beside Claire's name was not her birthday. It was exactly 25 years earlier, 3 days after she was born. I checked twice. Then I opened the note Eleanor had left on top of the box. I knew every crease in that paper. During her final week, she had pressed it into my hand and said, "Promise me you will keep my ring hidden until Claire turns 25. Not 24. Not when the family starts asking. 25. I had asked why. Eleanor had smiled with the tired patience she used whenever I wanted an answer before she believed I was ready for it. Because some truths are gifts only when the person receiving them can carry the weight. I kept the promise through her funeral, through 2 Christmases, and through every question our daughter Susan asked about the missing ring. I told the family Eleanor had made private arrangements. That answer was technically true and emotionally useless. Now the birthday had arrived, and the ring had turned my obedience into a problem. My phone rang before I could inspect it further. My son Daniel's name appeared on the screen. "Dad?" he said when I answered. "Please tell me you are not planning anything heavy today." His tone was gentle, but too careful. "What makes you ask?" I said. Silence lasted half a second too long. "Mom had secrets," he replied. "We all knew that near the end. Claire deserves one birthday without grief walking into the room." I looked at the inscription again. Daniel could not see my face, yet I lowered my voice anyway. "Did your mother ever tell you what was inside the box?" "No." The answer came quickly. Then he added, "And I think it should stay that way." When the call ended, I turned the ring toward the light once more. Beneath the first inscription, almost invisible, was a second line. "Ask Linda for the tide record before you decide what promise means now." I wrapped Eleanor's wedding ring in the same blue handkerchief she had carried on every anniversary trip we ever took together. The fabric still held the faint scent of cedar from the fireproof box, and for a moment, I caught myself smoothing its corners exactly the way she used to before slipping it into her purse. Small habits survive long after the people who teach them disappear. I placed the bundle inside my jacket pocket and drove toward the old downtown district where Linda Brooks still kept her modest law office above a bookstore. Linda had retired from active practice 2 years earlier, but she continued managing a handful of long-standing family trusts. She greeted me with quiet concern instead of surprise. "I wondered if today would finally bring you here," she said. "You knew I'd come?" "Eleanor did." That answer settled over the room with uncomfortable certainty. Linda unlocked a narrow cabinet and removed a worn leather journal tied with a faded green ribbon. I recognized it immediately. Eleanor had written in identical journals every autumn, though she rarely allowed anyone else to read them. "This one was left in my care," Linda explained. Your wife instructed me not to release it before Claire's 25th birthday unless you arrived carrying the ring. I slowly unwrapped the blue handkerchief. Linda studied the inscription through her reading glasses before nodding once. Then the condition has been met. She handed me the journal, but made no effort to open it herself. Inside, Eleanor's handwriting remained as steady as ever. If Victor is reading this, then he has kept his promise. I stopped there for several seconds. The words somehow felt more alive than the room around me. Several pages later, I found another entry. The birthday matters because 25 was the age when I finally understood that love and truth cannot protect each other forever. Eventually, one must protect the other. There was no explanation beneath it. Only another date. The same date engraved inside the ring. I flipped through the remaining pages, searching for answers. But Eleanor had filled most of them with ordinary family memories, recipes, gardening notes, and observations about Claire growing into a thoughtful young woman. The simplicity almost convinced me I had imagined the mystery. Almost. Then a folded bookmark slipped from between two pages. It wasn't paper. It was an old Coast Guard tide chart, carefully laminated decades earlier. Across the margin, Eleanor had written only 6 words. Ask Linda about Harbor Report 17. I looked up. Linda sighed softly. I hoped she would explain more before sending you to me. So what is Harbor Report 17? She folded her hands before answering. It isn't a report anymore. What does that mean? It became part of a sealed family instruction. I frowned. You keep saying things that answer the question without actually answering it. She smiled apologetically. That's because Eleanor was very specific. I may confirm procedures. I may not reveal the truth before you complete every step she planned. For the first time that morning, frustration slipped past my discipline. My family's gathering starts in a few hours. I know. I don't have time for puzzles. Linda met my eyes without raising her voice. Victor, your wife spent 25 years preparing this day. If she believed the order mattered, perhaps it still does. I leaned back in silence. During rescue coordination, skipping a checklist because the destination looked obvious had cost lives. Eleanor understood that better than anyone because she had listened to my stories for 3 decades. Perhaps this was another checklist. Before leaving, I carefully tucked the journal into my satchel. As I reached the door, Linda spoke one final sentence. There's something else you should know. I turned. Daniel came here yesterday. My pulse quickened. He asked whether I was still holding anything your mother left behind. What did you tell him? The truth. And what was that? I told him I couldn't answer until today. Suddenly, Daniel's phone call that morning no longer sounded like simple concern. It sounded like someone hoping a promise would expire before the truth reached the person it had always been meant to find. I left Linda's office looking far calmer than I actually felt. Years coordinating Coast Guard rescue missions had taught me that panic narrows vision, while patience exposes patterns. So by the time I reached my truck, I had already decided not to confront Daniel. If he had tried to reach Linda before the birthday, pressing him now would only harden whatever fear was driving him. Instead, I folded Eleanor's journal beside the wrapped wedding ring, started the engine, and drove toward Harbor Point Marina without telling anyone where I was going. If Eleanor had built this mystery one careful step at a time, skipping ahead, would only leave me guessing. Harbor Point had changed since I retired. New docks lined the shoreline where old rescue vessels once tied off between storms, but the records building remained exactly as I remembered it. A retired dockmaster named Carl Benson still volunteered there twice a week, organizing decades of maritime archives. "Victor Mason," he said with a broad smile. "You've gotten older. So have you. We earned it." His laughter faded when I mentioned Harbor Report 17. I wasn't expecting to hear that name again. He disappeared into a back room and returned carrying a slim gray storage box rather than a report. "I can let you see this," Carl explained, "because the incident became public years ago. Most people just forgot." Inside lay copies of rescue summaries from 25 years earlier. Harbor Report 17 described a small fishing vessel found drifting after a violent coastal storm. The captain and his wife had not survived. One sentence caught my attention immediately. "One unidentified infant transported safely to County Medical Center." I stared at the page longer than necessary. Some rescues never leave you. I remembered that storm. I remembered coordinating helicopters through impossible visibility. I even remembered the exhausted silence after learning the parents had been lost. What I did not remember was an infant. Carl leaned against the table. "You were coordinating 3 separate rescue sectors that night," he said. "Nobody expected you to remember every survivor." I nodded slowly. That explanation fit. Too well. Then another detail unsettled me. The date matched the inscription inside Eleanor's wedding ring exactly. At first, I convinced myself the connection was coincidence. Eleanor often volunteered at the county hospital after retiring from teaching. Perhaps she simply helped care for the child during recovery. That seemed compassionate, ordinary, and entirely consistent with the woman I had married. For several minutes, I believed I had solved the mystery. Then I noticed the final attachment clipped behind the rescue report. It wasn't medical. It was administrative. Across the top appeared one familiar line: Family Placement Conference. The document itself had been removed years earlier, leaving only the cover sheet. Someone had intentionally separated the report from what followed. I thanked Carl and slipped copies of the available pages into my satchel. "If Eleanor asked you to come here," Carl said quietly as I prepared to leave, "I'd keep following her map." "You knew?" He smiled gently. "I knew she asked me never to throw those files away. Nothing more, nothing less." Driving home, I finally understood one thing with certainty. The wedding ring wasn't leading me backward into memories. It was leading me through evidence. When I pulled into my driveway, Daniel's truck was already parked outside. He stood on the porch with folded arms, trying to look patient. "I figured you'd be here eventually," he said. "I had somewhere to go." "I know." His answer arrived too quickly. He glanced toward my satchel. "You found Harbor Report 17, didn't you?" For a heartbeat, I almost told him everything. Instead, I did exactly what Eleanor would have expected. I sighed, shook my head, and forced a tired smile. "Just old Coast Guard paperwork," I said. "Nothing that changes today." Daniel's shoulders relaxed almost immediately. He believed me. As he walked inside to help prepare for Claire's birthday dinner, I realized something that unsettled me far more than the hidden inscription ever had. Someone in my own family was waiting for this promise to disappear. When Daniel stepped inside the house, I remained on the porch until his footsteps disappeared into the kitchen. I wasn't avoiding him. I was giving myself enough time to think like the rescue coordinator I used to be, instead of the grieving husband I had become. Eleanor had never believed in dramatic surprises. Every difficult decision we made during our marriage began with the same principle: understand the sequence before acting on the conclusion. Looking back at everything I had collected that morning, I finally saw a sequence instead of scattered clues. The wedding ring carried Claire's name. The date matched Harbor Report 17. The tide chart pointed me toward the report. The report led to a missing family placement conference. The diary insisted that 25 was not an arbitrary birthday, but the moment someone could finally carry the truth. None of those pieces contradicted one another. They completed one another. I returned to Linda's office before noon, placing the ring, the copied rescue report, and Eleanor's journal across her conference table without saying a word. She studied my face for a long moment. "You've reached the next step." "I've reached the point where I need to know whether I'm imagining connections that aren't there." Linda nodded. "No." She opened a locked drawer and removed a cream-colored envelope sealed with dark blue wax. Across the front, in Eleanor's handwriting, were only 2 lines. "To be opened only after Victor discovers why the date matters." Linda gently touched the wedding ring. "The inscription satisfies that instruction." She broke the seal but did not unfold the letter. Instead, she handed it to me. Inside, Eleanor had written only 1 page. "Victor, if you are reading this, then you already know the date is not Claire's birthday. It is the day our family truly began. Do not let anyone confuse birth with belonging. Before you speak to Claire, you must understand something I never wanted hidden forever. I only wanted it protected until love was strong enough to survive it." I stopped reading. My hands had begun to shake. Linda quietly finished the final paragraph aloud after I nodded for her to continue. "Ask Linda for the placement authorization. She promised me she would never release it before today." Without another word, Linda reached into the same drawer. This time she removed a certified copy of a decades-old court authorization. Across the top appeared the same words I had seen referenced earlier: Family Placement Conference. Below them, one sentence immediately captured my attention. Temporary emergency placement approved pending adoption proceedings. The names beneath that sentence were mine and Eleanor's. For several seconds, I simply stared. Memory rushed back with startling clarity. The storm. The exhausted hospital staff. Eleanor bringing coffee to volunteers. The impossible week that followed. I remembered helping coordinate emergency housing for displaced families after the rescue operation. I remembered signing temporary guardianship paperwork because no relatives had yet been located for one surviving infant. What I had somehow never realized was that those temporary papers had become permanent months later. Not because anyone deceived me, because Eleanor and I had made that decision together after every legal requirement had been completed. The mystery had never been whether our family was built honestly. The mystery was why Eleanor believed Claire needed to learn this only now. My entire understanding of the first half of the day shifted. The hidden inscription was never intended to expose a secret adoption. It existed to explain the meaning of the ring itself. Our wedding rings had not symbolized the day Eleanor and I married. For her, they had come to symbolize the day we consciously chose to become parents. That changed everything. Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed again. "Daniel, I've been looking everywhere for you," he said, his voice strained. "Claire's asking whether you're bringing Grandma's ring." "I am." A long silence followed. Finally, he spoke with painful honesty. "Dad, please don't tell her anything else." I closed my eyes. "I haven't decided what I'll say." "You don't understand." "No," I answered quietly. "I think I finally do." When the call ended, Linda looked at me with genuine concern. "He'll try to stop you." "I know. And if you keep Eleanor's promise, your family may blame you before they understand." I carefully slipped the ring, the letter, and the placement authorization into my satchel. "I coordinated rescues for 32 years, I said. Sometimes reaching safe harbor meant sailing straight into the storm first. Outside, birthday decorations already lined my street. Inside my satchel rested everything Eleanor had spent 25 years preparing. I arrived home just after 1 o'clock, and the house already sounded like a celebration, trying to outrun the quiet. Claire's laughter drifted from the backyard, while Daniel and Susan arranged folding tables beneath the old maple tree Eleanor had planted during our 5th year of marriage. Watching everyone move through familiar routines should have comforted me. Instead, every cheerful voice reminded me that I carried the only conversation capable of changing the day forever. I left my satchel in the bedroom closet behind Eleanor's winter coats and joined the family as though nothing unusual had happened. Daniel noticed immediately. "You look tired," he said. "Long morning. You find whatever you were looking for?" I forced a small shrug. "Mostly old paperwork." Relief flickered across his face before he could hide it. That expression hurt more than any argument could have. He wasn't trying to protect himself. He truly believed he was protecting Claire. For the next hour, I helped hang paper lanterns, carried trays from the kitchen, and listened to conversations about school, vacations, and birthday plans. Every ordinary moment increased the weight of the promise waiting in the closet upstairs. When Claire hugged me, she smiled exactly the way Eleanor used to after catching me worrying over problems that had not yet happened. "Grandpa," she whispered, "thank you for coming early. I wouldn't have missed today." She studied my face. "You've been thinking about Grandma all morning, haven't you?" I answered honestly. "Yes." Claire squeezed my hand. "I have been too." She glanced toward the empty rocking chair that nobody had the heart to move after Eleanor passed away. "I still wish she'd told me why she always said 25 was a special age." My throat tightened. "So do I replied, though I now understood that wasn't entirely true. I knew why. I simply wasn't ready to say it. Later, while everyone gathered outside, Daniel quietly followed me into the hallway. "Dad." His voice carried no anger, only exhaustion. "We need to settle this before Claire gets here. She is here. You know what I mean." He lowered his eyes. "If Mom left something behind, maybe some questions don't deserve answers anymore." I looked at my son for a long moment. "When did you start believing that?" "The day she died." His honesty left no room for easy disagreement. "I watched our family barely survive losing her," he continued. If today becomes another day everyone cries instead of celebrating Claire, then what good does the truth actually do? I wanted to tell him about the ring, the letter, the placement authorization. Instead, I asked a different question. Did Mom ever tell you she regretted keeping this promise? No. Then why should we? He didn't answer. He simply shook his head and walked away before either of us said something impossible to take back. For the first time since opening the fireproof box, I questioned my own certainty. Perhaps Daniel was right. Perhaps Eleanor had imagined a future that no longer existed. Perhaps protecting the family now meant breaking the promise she had trusted only me to keep. The doubt stayed with me until I returned upstairs to retrieve the satchel. When I opened it, I froze. The cream-colored envelope from Linda was gone. I searched every pocket twice. The journal remained. The ring remained. The placement authorization remained. Only Eleanor's letter had disappeared. My pulse accelerated. Without that letter, the evidence chain no longer explained why the timing mattered. The documents proved legal history. The letter proved intention. I searched the bedroom, the hallway, and even my truck before admitting the obvious. Someone had removed only the one piece of evidence capable of explaining Eleanor's heart, instead of merely her decisions. Standing alone beside the closet, I realized I faced the first genuine defeat of the day. The celebration would begin in less than 2 hours. I still intended to honor my wife's promise. I simply no longer knew whether I could prove why she had made it. I stood motionless beside the bedroom closet, staring into the open satchel as though Eleanor's missing letter might somehow return if I waited long enough. During my years coordinating rescue operations, I learned that the first assumption after something disappeared was usually the wrong one. Equipment was rarely stolen. It had been moved. Reports were rarely destroyed. They had been filed elsewhere. Panic wasted time. Procedure found answers. So instead of accusing anyone, I closed the satchel, took a slow breath, and walked downstairs. The birthday party had already begun. Children chased one another beneath the maple tree while neighbors carried homemade desserts across the lawn. Music drifted softly from an old speaker Claire had hidden behind flower pots. Watching everyone smile made the missing letter feel almost unreal. Daniel noticed me first. "You okay?" I smiled more easily than I expected. "Better than before." That answer surprised him. "Good." For the first time all day, I stopped chasing the mystery. Instead, I helped refill lemonade pitchers, thanked guests for coming, and spent nearly an hour telling old Coast Guard stories that always made the grandchildren laugh. Slowly, the tension surrounding me disappeared. Daniel relaxed, Susan relaxed. Even I began to believe Eleanor would have approved, because she had never wanted the day to become about secrets. She wanted it to become about family. As sunset approached, Claire walked over carrying 2 slices of birthday cake. "One for you," she said. "And one?" "For Grandma." She placed the second slice beside Eleanor's empty rocking chair, without a word. Nobody suggested moving it. Nobody laughed. Everyone simply accepted the quiet gesture. I suddenly realized something I should have understood hours earlier. Eleanor never expected her absence to become invisible. She expected love to make room for it. That thought followed me back into the house when I went upstairs to retrieve the ring. The letter was still gone. I searched one final time before quietly giving up. As I lifted the satchel, something slid from the inside lining and landed against my shoe. A tiny folded card. Not the missing letter. A photograph. Its edges had yellowed with age. The image showed Eleanor sitting in a hospital chair, smiling with the exhausted happiness I remembered from decades earlier. She was holding a bundled infant. Standing beside her was me. I stared at the picture in disbelief. I had absolutely no memory of anyone taking it. On the back, written in Eleanor's careful handwriting, were 9 words. Some memories disappear until someone else needs them. Nothing more. No explanation. Yet somehow the photograph carried the same emotional weight as the missing letter. Proof. Not legal proof, personal proof. I slipped it beside the ring. As I turned toward the stairs, Daniel stood in the hallway. He looked embarrassed. I've been waiting. I can see that. He took a long breath before speaking. I owe you something. My heart immediately settled. This was no longer an argument. It was a confession. I found the envelope, he admitted quietly. I figured. I read it. I closed my eyes. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, I asked the only question that mattered. Why? His answer came almost as a whisper. Because I was afraid. Of what? That Claire would stop believing she belonged to us. I shook my head gently. Daniel, belonging isn't that fragile. He reached into his jacket and slowly removed the cream-colored envelope. The wax seal had already been broken. I'm sorry. I accepted it without anger. You should have trusted your mother. I know. He looked toward the backyard where Claire was laughing with cousins beneath strings of warm lights. I read Mom's letter 3 times. And? His eyes filled. She wasn't trying to reveal a secret. No. She was trying to give Claire permission to stop wondering. Those words struck me harder than anything Eleanor had written. Because they explained every unexplained glance Claire had carried through childhood. Every quiet question she never asked. Every hesitation when someone commented about family resemblance. Daniel wiped his eyes. I almost burned the letter. I know. But after reading it, I couldn't. He handed it back. I'm still scared. So am I. We stood together in silence. Not as opponents. As 2 men who loved the same family enough to fear hurting it. Outside, someone called Claire inside for the birthday toast. Daniel looked at me. It's time. I nodded. Eleanor's evidence chain was whole again. The ring, the journal, the placement authorization, the photograph, and finally, her letter. Everything she had prepared for 25 years rested once more inside my hands. When everyone gathered beneath the maple tree, the evening light settled across the yard with the soft, golden glow Eleanor always loved. Folding chairs formed a loose circle around the long dinner table. Children balanced paper plates on their knees, and Claire stood in the center while friends sang the last lines of Happy Birthday. She laughed, thanked everyone, and reached for the knife to cut the cake. "Before you do," I said quietly, "your grandmother asked me to give you one birthday gift." The yard fell silent. Claire looked at me with gentle curiosity. "You mean Grandma left me something?" "I promised I wouldn't give it to you until today." I walked forward carrying the small blue handkerchief. For a moment, I simply held it between both hands. 25 years of waiting suddenly weighed almost nothing. Because promises become lighter the instant they are finally fulfilled. I unfolded the cloth. Eleanor's wedding ring caught the evening sunlight, scattering warm reflections across the table. Several people quietly wiped their eyes before I had spoken a single word. Claire covered her mouth. "I thought Grandma wanted to be buried with it." "So did everyone else," I replied. "But she wanted something different." I handed Claire the ring. "Look inside." She turned it slowly until the tiny inscription came into view. Her expression changed. "My name." She whispered the words almost to herself. "And this date, it's the day our family truly began," I said. No one interrupted. I reached into the satchel and removed the old photograph first. This was taken 25 years ago. Claire studied it carefully. "That's Grandma." She pointed toward the bundled infant. "Who's the baby?" "You." Her eyes immediately searched my face. Then I placed Eleanor's letter into her hands. "I'd like you to read this yourself." The yard remained perfectly still except for leaves moving gently overhead. Claire unfolded the page. She read silently at first. Halfway down, tears began rolling down her cheeks. When she reached the final paragraph, she stopped, took a long breath, and looked toward the empty rocking chair. Then she read Eleanor's closing words aloud. "Claire, families are not measured by the moment a child enters the world. Families are measured by the moment someone chooses never to let that child face the world alone. Your grandfather and I chose you with joyful hearts. Never spend another day wondering whether you truly belonged. You were loved before you could remember being held." No one moved. No one even seemed willing to breathe. Claire lowered the letter. "Grandpa." Her voice trembled. "Are you saying—" I nodded gently. "Your grandmother and I became your legal parents through adoption after the storm that changed all of our lives." Another silence followed. Not shocked. Reverent. Claire looked toward Daniel. He stepped forward before she could ask anything. "I should have told you years ago," he said quietly. "I was afraid." She crossed the distance between them and wrapped both arms around him. "I've never needed different parents." Daniel broke into tears. "I know." "No," Claire whispered. "You didn't." She turned toward me. "Neither did you." Then, to everyone's surprise, she slipped Eleanor's wedding ring onto a thin chain around her neck instead of placing it on her finger. "I don't want to wear it as jewelry." She smiled through tears. "I want to carry it the way Grandma carried her promises." Susan quietly reached for my hand. Around us, conversations resumed in soft voices, not because the truth had become less important, but because it had finally found peace. The mystery that had waited 25 years ended without dividing anyone. It reminded us that the strongest families are often built by the bravest choices rather than the simplest beginnings. As the first stars appeared overhead, Claire walked to Eleanor's empty rocking chair. She rested one hand on its weathered wooden arm. "Happy birthday to us," she whispered. For the first time since losing my wife, the chair no longer looked empty. It looked occupied by everything she had spent a lifetime teaching us. Love could survive the truth. Sometimes, it was the truth that allowed love to become complete. The last guests left just before midnight. Paper lanterns swayed gently beneath the maple tree while empty dessert plates waited to be collected from the long wooden table. Someone had forgotten a folded sweater across the back of a chair. Children's laughter had faded into the quiet hum of crickets, and for the first time all day, the house belonged only to family again. Claire helped wash dishes while Daniel stacked chairs without being asked. Susan carefully wrapped leftover birthday cake for neighbors. No one spoke very much. There was nothing left that needed explaining. The truth had already done its work. I carried Eleanor's old rocking chair from the porch to the edge of the yard where she always watched sunsets. Claire noticed immediately and walked over holding 2 mugs of tea. "One for you," she said. "And the other?" She smiled. "For Grandma." Together we placed the second mug on the small table beside the chair. Neither of us pretended someone would drink it. Some traditions exist simply because love deserves somewhere to sit. Claire gently touched the wedding ring hanging from the silver chain around her neck. "I've been thinking. I know. You probably expected dozens of questions. I prepared for them." She laughed softly. "I only have one." I looked at her. "Were you and Grandma ever afraid?" The question lingered in the cool night air. "Every day," I admitted. "When we first brought you home, we worried someone might come to take you away. After the adoption became final, we worried we'd somehow fail you. Then we worried we'd waited too long to tell you." Claire nodded. "And today?" "Today I worried you'd believe love had been hidden from you." She reached across the small table and squeezed my hand. "It wasn't hidden. No, it was everywhere." She looked back toward the house. "In every birthday, every school play, every bedtime story, every embarrassing family photograph." A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. "I never needed proof that I belonged," she continued. "I only needed to understand why Grandma protected the story." I smiled. "Now you do." She looked toward the stars. "I think she waited until 25 because that's about the age people stop asking who gave them life and start asking who helped them build one." I had coordinated hundreds of rescues during my career. I had watched helicopters disappear into storms and return carrying strangers who would never know my name. Yet sitting beside my granddaughter, I realized Eleanor had understood something I spent decades learning. The greatest rescues do not always happen at sea. Sometimes they happen around a kitchen table, sometimes inside a courtroom, sometimes through a promise kept quietly for 25 years. The following Sunday, Claire asked if she could accompany me to the cemetery. We stood together before Eleanor's simple headstone. Claire knelt and carefully placed the old photograph beneath a small glass memorial holder designed to protect family keepsakes from the weather. "I'll take it home before it rains," she whispered. "I just wanted her to know," she paused, "that I finally understand." The breeze carried the scent of cedar across the hillside. For a brief moment, It reminded me of the fireproof box where this journey had begun. Funny how endings often resemble beginnings when viewed from the right distance. Before leaving, Claire slipped her arm through mine. "Grandpa?" "Yes? If I ever have children, you will. I want them to know this story." "So do I. But not because it's about adoption." She smiled. "Because it's about choosing people every single day." I looked once more at Eleanor's name carved into the stone. "My dear," I thought silently, "you were right again." Love had survived the truth. In fact, the truth had become its strongest foundation. And if this story reminded you of someone whose quiet sacrifices shaped your family, consider sharing it with them while you still can. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't discovering a hidden promise decades later. It's telling someone today that they have always belonged. Thank you for spending this time with our family. If this story touched your heart, I'd be honored if you subscribed, shared it with someone who needs a reminder that love is often a choice, and left a comment telling us, what promise has quietly shaped your family? Your stories may encourage someone who needs them more than you know. Good night, and may you never underestimate the quiet power of a promise kept.